Watchers in the Fourth Dimension.
They protect us from the wasting.
Reconfigured integration mode, Master.
At the time of arising, we servants will swarm.
Hello and welcome back to Watchers in the Fourth Dimension. I'm Anthony.
I'm Diana.
I'm Julie.
And I'm Riley, and we shall suck their lifeblood until they are empty husks and pass on to more worlds and yet still more.
This episode, we'll be encountering the wasting in State of Decay. Now, you may wonder what the wasting is, and the wasting is the wasting. But before we get into that, Diana's going to take a quick look at the mail. Over to you, Diana.
So we had a lot of comments regarding the Leisure Hive. Over on Instagram, we have Seamus98 who said, well, here we go. The final season of Tom Baker's Fourth Doctor. How can we miss you if you don't go away? Buckle up for the new era that was J&T, pure 80s cringe, which I love. And Facebook reiterates a lot of similar ideas. The comment by Michael Livesey actually sums up a lot of the feelings. Very glad to hear you were generally positive about this wonderful story, which should get more love than it does within the fandom. At the same time, it was pretty astonishing change of direction and style for the series, something I think gets lost if you pick and mix past stories out of sequence. And then a couple of other comments that kind of mention particular things. R.L. Gray mentions that if you do like this story, that he highly encourages to find a copy of the Target novelization. David Fisher adapted it himself and reinserts some of the humor that was cut from the story. And then it's a delightful read. And Kiernan James Evans said that he rewatched this recently and it's still a great story. Vastly more inventive direction and look drags the show kicking and screaming into the 80s. I like the injection of science into the show. He does have a chemistry PhD, which sounds like a lot of work, and the reduced humor works really well. He gives it an 8.5 out of 10, a TripAdvisor score the Hive could wish for.
I like that one.
I did too, yeah. Jamie Carlson adds that FIFO, however you pronounce it, FIFO, is also a computer science term used to describe cues, and that maybe every industry independently derived the term, which I'm now going to do research about. I got curious about who this Sandifer was and started reading her books. Come for the Doctor Who, stay for the literary theory. So excellent. 6 out of 10 leisure planets that are better than Orphan 55, I guess. Glad you like Sandifer. I love her. And first-time commenter, long-time listener, Hayden Chubb. Well, Watchers, I thought you would slate the Leisure Hive. One of my favorites, but lo and behold, you surprised me. As a long-time resident in Brighton, the beach does look pretty grim, but it's the entertainment on the beachfront that makes the place. For me, it's 8.5 glass prisms and colored water tubes for tachyon machinery controls. Mark Dunstan has some very nice things. He says it's a shock to the system with the same actors. A little sad they changed the title music, and the new Tom Baker costume is awfully bad. 5 tachyons out of 10. Where Keith Burton kind of disagrees. He loves the Doctor's new costume and pointed out that June Hudson really worked hard to avoid any colors used in the recent version of Tom Baker's outfit. She avoided any colors that would cause issues with the special effects shots. And the result, in his words, is a sumptuous burgundy ensemble. Reminiscent of the Time Lord robes, this amazing costume is both dignified and slightly funereal. It's almost as if this incarnation of the Doctor is slowly becoming aware of his impending end.
Wow.
I know. I loved it. It's so well written. And then Alan wanted to point out the real star here is Lovett Bickford, who turns this story into a true visual feast. So many weird shots and camera angles, and gave it 7.5 boxes of Captain Crunch Oops All Berries out of 10. And then finally, just to remind y'all that we do have a lovely email address. We had got an email from Gary who wanted to say how great the podcast is as a whole. It's not just his favorite Doctor Who podcast, but favorite podcast full stop! Exclamation point.
Aww.
Which is
Thank you.
So lovely. Gutted that I'm all up to date on episodes now and can't binge you guys anymore, but he's excited for the episodes ahead of us, and we're now hitting their favorite era. Although I may be biased being a child of the 80s. So chuffed that you've got similar views on the Leisure Hive as me, laughed out loud at your Barry chat. Love this story. It's so 1980s, colorful, fun, and well-directed. Even though they look mildly ridiculous, there's something visually appealing about the design of the Fomassi. For me, I rate it 8 overly dramatically scored, ridiculously long model shots out of 10.
I would say that a re-listen wouldn't hurt anything, so you can always go back and listen to your favorites.
And if you binged all of us, including the first 2 seasons, you are a saint.
Yeah, there were some rough moments early on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for that, Diana. And as a reminder to our listeners, we really do love getting your feedback, thoughts, comments, and questions. And we do try and read out as many as possible on the show, as you've just heard. So please do get in touch. You can contact us through Facebook, Instagram, and we don't really do Twitter anymore. So Facebook and Instagram at Watchers4D, or you can email us at watchers4d@gmail.com. Additionally, we would absolutely love it if you subscribe to the podcast if you're not doing so already, and if you dropped us a review or rating on your podcast platform of choice. All right, let's head behind the scenes on State of Decay. And on his ascension to the role of producer, John Nathan Turner inherited very few scripts, and only one that was actually viable for further development. This was The Vampire Mutations, written by former script editor Terrence Dicks. It was originally intended for season 15 and kept the vibe of the Hinchcliffe Holmes Gothic era. Dicks had been inspired to write the storyline by Bram Stoker's famous novel Dracula, as Doctor Who had not yet tapped into the vampire genre. Originally known as The Witch Lords when it was commissioned, it was The Vampire Mutations, and that was in mid-January 1977. A month later, work on The Vampire Mutations was abruptly halted by head of serials Graham MacDonald. The BBC was planning an expensive new adaptation of Dracula, and MacDonald feared that a Doctor Who story about vampires would be seen as a parody of their marquee project. The Vampire Mutations was thus expelled to a filing cabinet somewhere, and Dicks very hastily wrote Horror of Fang Rock in its place. While JNT favoured stories grounded in legitimate science over the hammer horror stylings of Hinchcliffe and Holmes, he found himself faced with little option but to resurrect Dicks's scripts. A revised storyline was commissioned in mid-December 1979, and some changes were obviously necessary, such as replacing Leela with Romana. The original version had also not included K9, but JNT was content for Dicks to feature the robot dog in a very minimal capacity. A bigger change was the inclusion of a new companion, Adric. JNT had decided that the team of the Doctor, Romana, and K9 was too indestructible and too unrelatable to a general audience, and he wanted to gradually introduce more vulnerable companions with whom viewers could easily identify. The first of these would be a 15-year-old orphaned mathematical genius whom he envisioned as an updated version of the roguish Artful Dodger from Charles Dickens's Oliver Twist. His name was an anagram of Dirac, a tribute to Nobel Prize-winning physicist Paul Dirac, who was a pioneer in the field of quantum mechanics. JNT and new script editor Christopher H. Bidmead issued a character outline for Adric at the end of January 1980. Now, obviously, we've already talked about Adric. He appeared in Full Circle, but State of Decay was filmed first, so it was as part of this story that they originally wrote his character brief and cast him, so we'll talk a bit more about that. Anyway, around a week before that character outline was issued, the full scripts for The Vampire Mutations were commissioned. Around this time, Bidmead changed the title to The Wasting because he wanted the inclusion of vampires to come as a surprise. Dicks thoroughly disagreed with this decision, as he felt that viewers would very quickly figure out the nature of the villains, and he thought that the new title would leave the serial open to ridicule. The script editor was already unhappy with the storyline, which he felt run contrary to the efforts that he and JNT were making to ground the show in solid scientific concepts. The two men found themselves butting heads constantly as Bidmead adamantly tried to steer Dicks away from horror cliches. This resulted in the addition of material on phonetic shift and the revelation that the tower was actually a disguised spaceship. This, in turn, inspired the story's new climax. Dracula was not the only vampire story to influence The Wasting, and this is kind of appropriate given our last Halloween special. The name Camilla was a homage to Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu's 1872 story Carmilla, and indeed the character was originally called Carmilla, and of course Carmilla being adapted into the Vampire Lovers. Other altered names included Orcon and Habris, who were originally known as Mikos and Harkan, respectively. The Time Lord Hermit, who told the Doctor about the Great Vampire, was described as an old woman in many drafts, and some elements of The Wasting had to be toned down after MacDonald advised JNT that he felt the scripts were too horrific. As mentioned, The Wasting was scheduled to be the fourth story to be transmitted during season 18, although it would be the second into production. The director assigned to the adventure was Peter Moffat. He had worked with JNT on All Creatures Great and Small, so JNT's busy bringing all of his All Creatures Great and Small friends into the show. And like Dix, Moffat had also found himself drawn into conflicts with Christopher Bidmead. Moffat was eager to draw upon vampire tropes emphasized in the horror movies of Hammer. He was unhappy that Bidmead was persistently amending the scripts to downplay these elements, and ultimately he refused to direct Bidmead's final version. JNT stepped in and allowed Moffat to produce something closer to the original. Moffat was also tasked with helping JNT and executive producer Barry Letts to find an actor to play Adric. Among the unsuccessful candidates was Christopher Hamill, who under the stage name Limahl was later the lead singer of the pop band Kajagoogoo and was the vocalist on The Neverending Story, the theme song of the fantasy film with the same name.
Yeah.
Things could have been quite different. During March 1980, a young BBC filing clerk named Matthew Waterhouse was suggested to the team by internal casting advisor Jenny Jenkins. Waterhouse was a long-time fan of Doctor Who, but was only just embarking on his acting career. Nevertheless, the production team was impressed by Waterhouse's unusual features and obvious energy. And at the beginning of April 1980, he was contracted for up to 24 episodes, covering the final 6 serials of season 18.
Oh, boy. Okay.
With an option for as many as 28 more during season 19.
Oh, God. All right.
His casting was announced to the press on May the 8th, 1980, and unfortunately during rehearsals, Waterhouse very quickly developed a poor rapport with both Baker and Lalla Ward. He felt that his co-stars were intimidating, while they found this kid too often impertinent and disrespectful, refusing to follow the instructions of cast and crew with vastly more experience.
They didn't take him under his wing, they just decided to be mean about it?
Yep. Additionally, obviously, Moffat had to put together his behind-the-scenes team, which featured exclusively returning names. Angela Smith continues her run as production unit manager. As composer, Paddy Kingsland returns for the third serial in a row. As designer, we have Christina Rusko returning to the show for the third and final time. She had, of course, previously designed season 13's Pyramids of Mars and season 14's The Hand of Fear. And as costumer, we have the third contribution of Amy Roberts, who we've seen previously handling costumes for season 15's Image of the Fendal, as well as our immediate previous serial to this one, Full Circle. As production began on The Wasting, a source of concern was the health of Tom Baker. The series star had been unwell since the start of recording on The Leisure Hive, and his condition was beginning to deteriorate. And to make matters worse, he and Lalla Ward were still not on speaking terms after she had rebuffed his attempts to rekindle their romance some weeks earlier. And it was under this cloud that location filming began at the end of April 1980. Now, between location and studio recording, it was decided to change the serial's name to State of Decay in response to Dix's passionate hatred of The Wasting. Dix didn't exactly love the name State of Decay either, but it didn't change again, obviously. By the time studio recording began with a 2-day session in mid-May, Baker's illness was now at its worst and had even caused his hair to flatten, and it had to be permed to regain its usual curl. After that 2-day session, rehearsals resumed and Baker was finally on the mend. He was also surprised and delighted that Ward was now willing to give their relationship another chance. In hindsight, she would acknowledge that this was a mistake on her part. She allowed her reaction to Baker's unhappiness and the closeness of their characters to muddy her judgment. Meanwhile, in a newspaper published towards the end of May 1980, Lalla Ward revealed that she would soon be leaving the show. And by the time filming wrapped up, Baker and Ward carefully began confiding to certain friends and co-workers that they were engaged to be married.
Wild.
Yeah. The finished version of the serial was broadcast on consecutive Saturdays, as usual, between the 22nd of November and the 13th of December 1980, and it was relatively uneventful. Before we discuss the story, I have the short summary of this episode, so here goes. The Doctor and Romana stumble upon a planet stuck in medieval times, ruled over by a triumvirate of vampires known as the Three Who Rule. The story claims that it's because the vampires are deliberately suppressing knowledge, but we all know that vampires are just really into both feudal and gothic aesthetics. Anyway, they serve a giant slumbering space vampire known as the Great Vampire who's buried underground. We then get some needless fanwank about a previously unmentioned space war between the Time Lords and the vampires that led to a directive that Time Lords destroy any vampires that they come across. No chill whatsoever. In the most epic vampire slaying ever, the The Doctor uses a spaceship as a giant stake to stab the great vampire. The three who rule rapidly age and die, and the Doctor and Romana leave like there's nothing to it. Medieval vampire overlords are apparently just another Thursday. Oh, and Adric was in this too, getting himself into trouble as usual. All right, let's go ahead and talk about it. Part 1. And I'm going to let you guys talk for a bit.
A thing I noticed, because this is what apparently I'm noticing these days, is that this started with short episodes.
Mm-hmm.
But then they got longer and longer as we went, instead of shorter and shorter as we went. I just find that interesting. It's very inconsistent.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I would put that down to some extent just to a new production team getting their feet under the table and figuring it out.
This one really felt like a throwback because model work is back.
Yeah.
Alien planets, which are designed after the Middle Ages in Europe, are back. I haven't seen those in a while. So it was setting off in that kind of direction. And then it's like you were saying in the behind the scenes, Anthony, it feels like the Holmes Hinchcliffe era, but kind of done weirdly.
The thing that really throws me off is the synth. With the vibe of the story, I expect Dudley Simpson's more organic music to accompany it.
Yeah. But, you know, the synth didn't bug me too much. I thought it was all right.
There were times that they used the synth just to make instrument noises, and that was pretty okay.
Yeah, I don't dislike it. It's just a little jarring for something that, in so many other ways at first appearance, seems like it's Holmes and Hinchcliffe. And then that's the first thing that really tells you this is not.
Yeah, that and Adric.
Hey.
A's for horses. Oh, wait, that's so tried and true. I'm sorry.
I don't love Adric because he's always great. I just love Adric because it's very clear that he's
an idiot.
And that Doctor Who does not have a storied history of writing teenagers all that great. And they're as confused to do with the teenagers they always have been. Bless his little heart, because he is dumb.
He's very frustrating to me. He's a very frustrating character.
Yeah, buckle up, because like the Chappelle Show skit, the Player Haters Club, this is going to be the Adric Haters Club, at least coming from me.
That's totally fine. I understand. I get it. I get why people don't like Adric.
I'm not closed off to him completely. Like, who knows? Maybe there'll be a serial on the way that will completely change my opinion of him, and I'll say, wow, what a great turnaround here. So it's not like I'm unwilling to budge on this. But after Full Circle and now this, I feel like we're just going to be going in one direction with him, and that is a direction I do not like.
And I know I said this last episode when we did Full Circle, but when I was 8 and seeing Adric for the first time, in retrospect, yes, he's not well scripted, and yes, they still don't know what to do with the teenager. But as an 8-year-old seeing a teenage boy traveling with the Doctor, I thought Adric was awesome.
Right, because it's living out your fantasies.
Yeah.
You put yourself in his shoes. I don't know. I feel like this is always something that's very difficult with science fiction. I don't know what it is about this type of character, but I feel like there was a similar issue with Wesley Crusher on Star Trek: The Next Generation.
It's one of my frustrating things. I dislike the entire concept of having to have a character that you could put yourself in the shoes of. I find it frustrating because it limits what you can do with them, because if they're always going to be kind of terrible, or not terrible per se, but they're always asking all the questions and stuff like that, like after a while that gets a little old, in my opinion. And they're not very well-rounded characters because they can't be well-rounded, because if people are supposed to put themselves into those shoes, you have to not give them a lot of backstory. You need to not give them a lot of detail, because the moment you start adding detail, then you can't put yourselves in their shoes.
I think that's a really fair point. Like, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'll always try and figure out a reason story reason that Adric does the shit he does. And that's part of the entertainment for me, is like just what I will acknowledge is my own private headcanon. But because he does not encompass a large part of the story, nor is he actually all that significant. They could have not included him at all, and it would have basically been the same story. And I acknowledge that. But I do like the fact that what he's kind of presenting, because, you know, Waterhouse was probably taking this job pretty seriously and had some real work that he had put into these scenes. He feels to me like a naive, secluded, nerdy teenager who obviously thinks they have the world figured out and is now emulating his newest hero, the Doctor. The Doctor storms in and does things without thinking, so I'm going to do it too. But Adric's a dummy and doesn't have the life experience that the doctor has. So when he does it, he doesn't realize, oh, I probably need to tell Romana this so that she will turn in me and say, that's a dumb idea. He doesn't have that connection with the world around him quite yet. And I enjoyed it looking at it from that perspective. But Adric said is a big old dummy in this one. Bless his heart.
I can understand that perspective, but I don't know, it seems so silly. Maybe I'm just being biased here because we're talking about science fiction fantasy. So why am I trying to throw in the argument of realism? Because I was about to say, in a situation where a 13-year-old does something stupid in a dangerous situation, especially in a science fiction fantasy realm kind of thing, they usually will die a brutal, horrible death if we were to show what happens when you do things that are irresponsible. But if you're going to keep doing those things over and over and just have this plot armor because he's a 13-year-old, it becomes a drain on the story. But you can't be realistic. And also, it is a kid's show. They're not going to kill a kid. But that's why you shouldn't even have the kid on there in the first place. At least not as a continual companion.
I do want to just say, Riley, your comparison to Will Wheaton got me wondering, and maybe one of our listeners knows, have they ever done like a convention appearance together?
Aw.
I know that Will Wheaton has some, and all respect to Will Wheaton, of course he listens to our show, right?
Yes.
He does. Hey, Will.
Hi, Will.
Yeah, I understand, Will. All respect to the stress and the bullshit that you have to deal with as a child actor, having a bunch of middle-aged nerds say that you suck. And I only have the forgiveness of time because I don't think my opinion. I think the actor's fine. I just don't like the character of Adric. That's all. I think the actor's fine. It's a good performance of doing what he was supposed to do. But I'd be very curious to see if Waterhouse has to deal with that from the Doctor Who fandom. Did he? Do we know? Oh,
yeah.
Shit. Okay. All right. Then I'll downshift a little bit. I don't want to be looped in with those people.
That may be a fair point. I may love the actor more than I love Adric.
And I'm not sure if he's on good terms with Tom and Lala these days, but he did also get on the wrong side of the Fifth Doctor era cast, and they have now all become friends. So,
okay, but you've just revealed to me that we got some time here.
Yes. So, dear listener, look forward to your
Spoilers.
bi-weekly Adric rants from Riley.
No, I'm going to shut up about it. I will call out the points, but we will not go into this Adric summit that we're having here right now to discuss it as if it's like some sort of national security issue. No, this is where it's going to end. We will point out the stupid shit he does, but we're not going to have a true in-depth discussion, maybe in a retrospective. But that's it.
All right, well, let's get back to talking about State of Decay.
I am getting really frustrated with the K9 situation, and because Anthony kind of mentioned that we only have a small amount of time left, they should have just pulled the trigger. Like, just end it without...
They didn't have to disrespect him.
Out of the most recent serials, that they were as bad to him in this one as they were in the previous ones.
He wasn't blown up or decapitated. He was just kind of left in the TARDIS.
And he was doing all of those, like, I'm going to scan the whole planet and the whole E-space, and I can tell you where the people are, but not Adric over in the corner?
Right. And can someone explain to me why K9 didn't have a shoot first, ask questions later protocol for TARDIS security in that situation where Adric just suddenly shows up? And also, one other thing, I think this maybe, this has already happened since the Doctor and Romana have left. Was I having a stroke, or did the Doctor describe the setting the exact same way to Romana and then walks into the TARDIS and says it with the exact same tone and exact same phrasing to K9? Did I have a stroke when this happened? I swear he did that. Almost the exact same line. Oh, no, it was the same line with the same intonation describing the planet. No? Okay.
It's possible.
All right, so that's a stroke.
I don't remember
then.
it, but you know.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean anything.
No, it sure does not.
I want to talk about a few things.
Go for it.
So first off, this society sucks. And why everyone is just like, yeah, these three people of power, cool. And I am so disappointed about the wasting is the wasting and nothing more than that.
I did want to know what the wasting actually was. It was never explained.
It sounds cool.
Never.
I was so disappointed when I found out the story had been written for like a long time, because this feels like a rush write. And I understand that they had to do some rewrites and everything to fit the new stuff and things. But like even the vampire storyline is so flippin' lazy. And it's like kind of encapsulated in the fact the wasting is the wasting. Shut up. Like, don't do that. At least explain something. Has anybody ever actually seen it? Is it made up? Even at the end, are they talking about the vampires? Like what?
Yeah, and we'll get to it in part 3, but I have extreme issues with the involvement of the Time Lords in this. We'll come back to that, though.
The wasting doesn't make sense if it were going to be the vampires, because they just take people from town, bring them in with no explanation, and they just disappear. I would think they would try to be a little bit more clever than that and actually do a wasting that was people found in their homes drained of blood that was taken from them, and then just things like that. But no, that's not what they do. They just are like, hey, we're barbarians and we're just taking these people out of this village. But remember, we're protecting you from the wasting that we don't know what it is. Ugh, not fun.
They're not doing a good job of livestock management, because that's kind of what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's just not very effective. And I found it. It did happen. The doctor outside of the TARDIS to Romana says, look, protective castle, village dwellings huddled like ducklings around their mother, typical medieval scene. He then walks straight into the TARDIS and says, it's awfully nice out there, K9, protective castle with village dwellings huddled like ducklings around their mother, classic medieval scene. It's just very strange. I guess maybe that's the joke, the flippancy, that he's just willing to repeat himself exactly. I don't know. It just felt a little weird. Sorry, I'm fixated on this.
I see you're fixated on this. I'm going back to the wasting again. Right?
Oh, sorry.
So, no. It is because I'm going to harp on it some more. So, one of the main things that they were trying to do in the society was saying that all science and knowledge was not allowed. And for me, there would have to be a couple of things in which they would not want them to know about science. One would be if there was an actual wasting of people wasting away, then science and knowledge would be something where they would be able to potentially come up with ideas of what is causing it. But if the wasting is just the wasting is not any of that, then why do you have to suppress all science and knowledge? I don't understand.
Maybe they could develop better weapons and like steel, because that was considered a very important part of it towards the end.
Here's where this is going. I really enjoyed this story, and now I'm questioning everything.
I'm glad you did.
I enjoyed the beard game on the king, man, with like the little curls all around. Yes. That was pretty nice there.
Looked very kind of octopus-esque.
I also have another question. The noise
if it's not about beards, Julie, no.
This is the beard time.
Beard hour now.
I'm so
Because a lot
sorry.
of the peasants had great beards as well. There was a strong beard game in this story.
There was. Mm-hmm.
Usually I'm the one pointing out the beards. No, I had more questions and comments, and I don't understand. And what were the noises that the bats were making?
Me too.
What was that noise?
When the doctor was like, oh, it's bats. And I was like, what are you talking about?
That's not bats. That's an army of Casio keyboards.
Yeah.
Bats?
And just the bats just like freewheeling it over the screen on those little fishing lines. Like, I just love a chaotic fishing line bat moment.
Oh, yeah, those are wonderful.
No, the better moment was, I think it might be in the second one, so sorry, but when the counselor says, no, I'm going to get them, and then it like superimposes like the bat onto him as it fades in. I was actually quite pleased about that. It's very stereotypical, but I like it anyway.
Yeah.
I guess that's the end of part 1, since we've had our digital bat attack. Right?
Yep, and we're into part 2. Let's go.
This is where the reveal of vampirism takes place, and I will be honest with you, I had no idea going into it, and even with the bats, I didn't have any idea either until at this point when it gets revealed there's the vampires. I made a note. I'm like, well, at least this ties in with the bats. I'm glad that they're there for a reason.
Amazing.
Should have noticed from the weird makeup, because
I love their eye makeup.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Love it. And they all have it, all three of them. It's like they decided as like Mean Girls, we're all going to do this together. Everyone's going to wear pink on, I believe, Wednesdays. And we're all going to wear this eye makeup.
Somewhere around Generation 12, they said, we need to go heavy on the bronze.
Yeah, early.
I have to say, speaking of the 3 vampires, Camilla, oof. Oof, Camilla.
Yeah, well, after Camilla is the vampire, as we know with vampire lovers, they are quite the lookers.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I did think there was a way that at one point she stared down Romana, and I was like, oh, is this heading in the direction of the vampire lovers?
Men.
And speaking of Romana, this is a strong criticism I have. Did anyone else find it completely out of character that she would be acting scared?
I thought that was weird too.
At that level, yes.
Yeah, that really did not sit with me well because I'm so used to Romana just being really not concerned about danger because she knows she can think her way out of it. I think of how many times Romana 1 has been captured and she just treats it like she has no bother at all. And now this, she's just freaking out all the time.
Because what I find weird about it is the fact that she knows ahead of time that there's something there. So that's why I don't understand why she's so scared, because she doesn't know it's a vampire. So she doesn't know how crazy it's going to be. She just hears things and is kind of creeped out by it. And that's the part that doesn't make sense.
So I headcanoned this a bit.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about part 3 already because this is all in part 3. We find out there's this big fucking war in Time Lord prehistory between the Time Lords and the vampires. And my assumption here is that war was so terrible and awful that it effectively left like a race memory.
Oh, God.
Oh, boy. Okay, I get you.
And that's why
tracking,
Romana has such a visceral reaction to them. At least that's how I rationalized it.
And here's my headcanon is that the vampires that the Time Lords faced were the space vampires from the movie Life Force.
Oh, amazing. Amazing. I think a fair number of the cast for this actually had parts in Life Force.
I would not be surprised. As we know, there's only 30 active working British actors at one time, and they can't add one more without one of them retiring. So,
yeah, the guy who played Zargo was in Life Force. Oh, and it was just him. Yeah,
okay.
Zargo was in Life Force.
You know, it's funny how the concept of space vampires is so very common. Like, Star Trek had their famous salt vampire, which scared the shit out of me when I was a child. Buck Rogers had a vampire episode, a space vampire episode. And of course, there's the movie Life Force. It seems to be something that everyone likes to go to in the science fiction realm.
And that's why I kind of like tolerated this episode. Because it's like how like modern television is determined to have a musical episode that's always not good. I understand that at some point there's going to be a let's do a vampire episode. And I'm always interested to see like how do we do the vampire in the science fiction episode. And like it was just a basic vampire. Like there wasn't ever anything twisty-turny about the vampires themselves. Even the fact that they were like mostly thralls. Like there's a big bad one. Like I get it. And I don't even get to see him. Like if you're going to do vampires in science fiction, you kind of have to science fiction them up a little bit. And I just didn't feel like that happened.
I feel very disappointed in the fact that we did not get to see the big bad vampire. I was very sad.
We did a little bit.
No.
Forearm does not count. We are not Victorian England. Like, give me an ankle at least.
Fair. We saw him on the screen.
No. Also, no, Anthony.
Okay. Trying here, guys. I'm trying.
No, the part in part 2 that really like actually engaged me, possibly the only real part, was when they actually went into Grimm's Law, which I got real excited about because I had not studied Grimm's Law when I watched this the first time. So this would have gone fully over my head. But it's a really interesting aspect to the story. And if they had gone more like that, I would have been into it because it's a cool application of Grimm's Law. But they didn't. They just went what usually happens in a vampire story. Okay, at a spaceship.
Yeah, that's basically the phonetic shift, right, Diana?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Highly recommend looking into it if you haven't. Very fascinating.
And a similar thing eventually happens in English as well with the great vowel shift.
It's the whole fact that we pronounce T's as D's, little instead of little. It's that concept.
Okay.
Yeah. We haven't talked about the rebels yet because they rock up in part 1.
They're just our standard rebels like we've had before.
Yeah,
right.
they are. But it does lead to the Doctor saying what I think was a great word, and that's Technocothica. I want more words like Technocothica.
That was a good one. I felt like I was in Wicked.
Yeah.
Yes.
I did like the lead rebel's braids over his head.
Interesting style choice, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, real cute.
No one could tell that he was balding because of those things.
I wondered if the actor came in with just really long white hair and bald on top, or because like they were braids coming out of his little ring hair around the base of his head and then flopped over the top. And so I wondered if they gave him extensions for this part.
There are a couple of things in part 2 that I really like. The disused fuel tanks in the spaceship being used to store blood. That was pretty cool. And then converting the fuel system into a feeding system for the Great Vampire. Pretty cool. I like that a lot. And of the vampires, while Zargo has a great beard, Camilla's pretty hot, Orkon is wonderfully creepy and kind of badass. And he just kind of shows up and steals the scene.
Honestly, why are the other two there is my question, because they literally don't do much of anything except maybe eye candy because of Lady and Beard. It's fine.
Was that one of the working titles of the Anthony? I didn't hear that during your behind the scenes. Was Lady and Beard not one of the working titles of this?
No, but since we were talking about the lesbian vibe of the vampire lovers, Lady and Beard suddenly has a whole new context.
It does.
I will say one of the things I did enjoy is the constancy of that heartbeat beating that entire time. That I really enjoyed, and it set an atmosphere. Now, you say, Anthony, oh, well, you saw this and that. Now, if I saw an arm out there with like an IV in there of actually getting the blood feeding into his system, maybe. But we got nothing that actually had the vampire either with an IV or drinking it out of a tube. So I'm disappointed.
Fair. We end part 2 with the Doctor and Romana at the base of the spaceship, and Orkon comes up behind them. I'm Orkon. Welcome to my domain. Cliffhanger. And we're into part 3.
It's not even his domain.
It sounds good, Julie. It sounds good.
Also, best recap ever, 30 seconds tops. Wonderful.
And we get hypnotism again, but I will let it pass because that's the vampire thing.
It is a vampire thing.
You can't do the vampire thing without it, I think.
And they have to maintain eye contact to be able to do it. So there are very strict rules, and we don't just have someone being mind controlled for 3 episodes straight.
Right. So that's fine. And they run off, and I guess it is time to bring Adric's plot back into discussion.
Yeah, in part 2, we saw Adric trying to rally the peasants to rise up against the vampires. And here he's basically like, oh yeah, you can give me power. You son of a bitch, I'm in.
He doesn't do a great job of selling it, I'm not gonna lie. At all. Sorry, everyone.
No, he's just got one of those like empty faces that doesn't necessarily get much out sometimes. I definitely was like, I don't know what angle you're trying to sell here. Like, what are you doing, Adric?
I don't think he knew what he was doing either.
Yeah. Like I couldn't tell if he was being serious, playing, like even what was the tone. I couldn't figure it out. So it makes it so that when he turns around and he's like, ha ha ha, I was joshing the whole time. Did you know that though?
It's definitely the actions of someone who has no fucking clue what he's doing. Like, he was raised on this Starliner. He has a badge for mathematical excellence. And he ran away to be with his brother and their friends in the cave. And even they're like, bro, you have no idea. You should go back to the Starliner. And he does it again. He stows away on the TARDIS, running away from the Starliner. And we're now the ones going, bro, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, like, let's just, like, can we just play Take You Home, please?
Yeah.
I love it. He's so obnoxious.
Oh, boy.
But I did like the moment where Romana could pull the date off the ship, like off the top of her head. And the doctor looked over at her and said that she was wonderful. And Romana was like, oh my God. What? Me? You think I'm wonderful?
I did wonder whether that was the doctor saying it to Romana or Tom saying it to Lala.
The fact knowing that they're in this little are they, aren't they, I'm mad at you, and that he just comfortably slings his arm around her shoulder several times in this episode made me giggle the whole time.
I can't remember the last time they shared scenes where there was warmth. Like usually it was rather by the book, and then most of the serials, Romana and the Doctor are off in two completely different locations for most of the serial. So for them to have that moment in the throne room was a welcome return to something I missed the Doctor and the companions having.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right, since we're in part 3, can we talk about the needless inclusion of the Time Lord lore?
Yeah, it was unnecessary.
It is the definition of fanwank.
Yeah.
There is no good reason for it. It's just there, I guess, to explain why the Doctor has records in the TARDIS on how to kill the Great Vampire. But that's not necessary. There could have been other ways for him to get that information. So we've just added this big bit of Time Lord lore that didn't really need to be there. And then, of course, in the 90s and the 2000s, you get enormous amounts of lore built up in the novels on it from like this 2-minute.
Oh.
Of the
Oh.
Vampire War?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
no.
good God.
In fact, there's even a return to this planet in one of the books.
Why? Oh, does it turn out that the Great Vampire isn't dead?
It's called Blood Harvest, and I don't really remember exactly what happened in it because it's been 25 years since I read it.
That just reminds me of The Harvest and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, so I hope that they didn't steal it from Doctor Who because I actually like that. So
Yeah, the Doctor Who one was 1994.
Aw, man.
So, yeah.
Ugh.
But equally, I'm not really sure that Joss Whedon or anyone involved in Buffy were reading Doctor Who's New Adventures.
I'm surprised that the book of the return to this planet wasn't called The Wasting, but for real this time.
It was written by Terrence Dicks. So,
Okay.
you know, he came back and continued to build on his lore.
I think the thing that frustrated me so much about the Time Lord stuff was all he learned was you're going to do it the way you always kill vampires. You just make it out of metal.
Mm-hmm.
You can't even like have it coated in something. You can't have like ions necessary. Like nothing, just some metal. Okay.
Also, when I heard them talking about like bow ships, I was just sitting there. I'm like, am I going to get a recreation of the Little Mermaid fight sequence? Because that would be excellent.
That's so crazy. I had the same thing happen. Which would have made this story so much better.
100%. I would have been like, yeah, we're just like Ursula. And then we would have actually seen the Great Vampire. It would have been beautiful. But no, we did not. We just get a giant pointy thing and stab it through the heart. Yay. Like any other giant creature, just stab it in the heart. Yay.
All right. So, I also very quickly want to talk about the record of Rassilon being on a fucking punch card.
No, I loved that. No, that was
Isn't that amazing?
that was everything.
And it prints,
Masters of all time and space.
and then it prints this out on receipt paper.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
This is the best Rassilon can do.
Well, see, the funny thing is that to get the records of Rassilon, you have to buy the printer paper from him. That's how it works.
Well,
That's his like deal.
Well, the fact that they're only stored on Type 40s.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's very convenient.
Yeah.
You don't say.
Let's be honest. They were like, no one's going to really want this model. So we're going to put this really important thing on the model that no one wants.
Yeah, right.
It's fine.
I mean, at one point it was the latest and greatest model, and I guess they just decided after that, we're good.
But after that, you don't have to worry about the one vampire that got away.
Yeah.
It no longer becomes relevant.
Lucky for them, the 2 Time Lords that did come across it had a Type 40. It would have been really bad if they'd had a Type 50.
Then they wouldn't know to stab things.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the end of part 3. So Romana's trying to wake up Adric and causes Camilla and Zargo to awaken. Zargo throws Tarek across the room, killing him, and apparently stale blood is no bueno. And we end with Camilla going for Adric, Zargo going for Romana, and she looks scared, and that's our cliffhanger.
Okay, and what the hell is she doing? She knows he's on that side of the room. Why is she literally walking backwards into him?
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
There's a lot of things.
And
Sure.
shouting to wake him up, like they're all in the same room. Shut up. Shake him. Drag him. Something. Don't shout.
Shake him like a Polaroid picture. All right, part 4. Let's...
Yeah. I think what was very interesting and kind of a direction I wanted this to go, but it didn't go there. So you have the 3 of them vampires, and they say that at midnight, our servitude will end. And I really wanted it to go in the direction that often does happen, but I like it anyway, is that they get killed by the Vampire King himself because he decides that he no longer needs them and just kills them. But that's not what we get because we don't get to see the great vampire, so...
Another interesting thing that carries over from old vampire films is they're really big on large arm motions when they're kind of leering and moving around the room. You know what I mean? They do the kind of pull out, stretch their arms out and move them around like they're trying to do a magic spell or something. I guess it's supposed to be menacing, but it looks like modern dance a little bit. So I'm not sure if it works. Yes. So I'm not too sure if it works. I think this goes back to Diana's criticism, which I agree with. As much as I love doing the gothic stuff, you're doing space vampires, you got to weird it up a little bit. You can't just put it over a medieval setting. And I am so tired of alien planets looking like medieval Europe. I'm tired of it.
But the BBC has the costumes.
Right, I guess so.
Riley, I can tell you're still missing the weird.
I do, man. Where are we going to go back to freaking people flying around something that looks like the moon surface dressed up like a bee or a wasp or a moth, man?
I think you might get what you're looking for very soon.
Okay.
Don't tease me.
I have another question. As the doctor was reading those lovely little cards, right? And it says that a Time Lord must do whatever he must do, including giving up his life for it. And then the doctor giving this crazy motivational speech. It's very undoctor-like. It's kind of weirded me out a little bit for him, especially the speech part.
Wait, are you talking about with the rebels?
Yes.
Oh, so that's like him doing the Henry V speech.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor doesn't do the Henry V speech.
Which I think the reason why they did it, you're right, it doesn't fit his character. I think it was an attempt at humor.
Mm-hmm. I think so too.
Yeah. That's always good writing, to sacrifice character consistency for the sake of humor. I agree with you, Julie, on that. That did feel very much out of place. Well, I'm glad you find this funny, Doctor, but actually some of us are going to die.
Because usually he would just go in and say, this is what we're doing, deal with it. But instead he tries to boost them up and get them hoorah. And I'm like, no, that's not what we do, Doctor.
And even if he had leaned into more of a Shakespearean mode, where it was very clear that's what he was like, I am playing the part of a rebel leader today. If he had leaned into that concept and that bit of it all, I think it could have maybe been funny. I even was sitting there going, can you just go? Can we go? Let's go.
As a reference that only our British listeners would get. And tonight, Matthew, I'll be playing a rebel leader. That's going to mean nothing to the Americans.
Nope, right over my head.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded funny just out of context. But...
All right. There is one thing that I think backs up my headcanon of erased memory, and hear me out.
Oh boy.
That moment that we get a brief glimpse of the Great Vampire on the little scanner, the Doctor has a very visceral reaction, he turns away in disgust at it. To me, there's something going on with him and Romana about this creature that is just so, primal in terms of a reaction, and that kind of backs up my headcanon to me. And you don't have to agree with me, but if you don't, you're wrong.
I may not necessarily agree with you, Anthony, but I will say that if they would have hit on that more, I would have enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
I really would have. I think if that's an interesting level to give to this general just vampire story, and that's so much more interesting, and I would love to see that discussed and played around with more.
Much as I thrashed it for being fan wanky, they kind of needed to lean into that a little bit more.
At least not necessarily to give out the details of what the Time Lord is, just to talk about the idea of characters dealing with a
generational trauma.
Exactly. Yeah. That would have been fascinating.
Because then that becomes less about Time Lord lore and more of just these being giant creatures that tried to take over the universe lore.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it wasn't just oh, hey, what's another thing that is a relic of the Time Lords? It would be, oh, hey, things sucked before because there was a thing. Oh, that sucked people. Okay, great. I didn't mean to do that.
Amazing. Good job, Julie.
We should touch on, since we are already on the rebel invasion after the Doctor has got them all hyped up, let's discuss K9 leading them into battle, shooting left and right.
Yeah, he had a badass moment.
I know, he did. And then, of course, him saying reconfigured into aggression mode, Master.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
So cute.
It's been a while.
I wanted more dick shots, but I did get a butt shot. So I'll take it.
Yeah, you don't have much more time for K9 to be shooting people in the dick.
And I guess now we should run from it and dread from it. Adric's clever plan.
God, he's so dumb.
So, yeah, it's pretty dumb.
I will admit, when he was showing to Romana his playing with the idea of like, maybe I should be a vampire, I already had such a dislike of the character, and I was just sitting there saying, you son of a bitch, you know, I called you a Scrappy Doo, but at least Scrappy Doo was loyal.
No, Scrappy Doo just pulled on the monster's mask to play around for a few minutes and then realized that everyone took him seriously, and that was bad. Actually, the thing that I really enjoyed out of Adric in this little bit is the back and forth he got to have with Romana, where she was like, well, we went out of our way. We did not have to come back to save your sorry ass. And he goes, save who? Save what? Save where? And is riling Romana up. And then that moment where Romana was like, save who? Huh? How do you like it? I thought it was a nice touch of Adric is annoying and he annoys them. And it was just a nice, I'm annoying everybody. Not just you, wonderful viewer, but also Romana.
Well, she hits on that again at the very, very end when he is explaining to the Doctor his plan, and then she snips at him and says, but you didn't, did you?
Yeah. I loved it.
Oh, same here.
Yeah.
I did like that. Let's keep him around to be a punching bag. Let's do that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry. That's also one of the things I like about Adric is the character is good fodder for that. And I enjoy that. Sorry about it.
Very quickly, Riley, just to correct you on one thing.
Uh-oh.
In the 2002 live-action Scooby-Doo movie...
Yeah, he's the villain, and it's wonderful.
Scrappy's the villain.
The live action, right.
The best thing that could have ever happened.
Yeah,
and so
that was good.
I give that movie a 10 out of 10 because of casting and because of doing that. It is the perfect movie.
Yes, I remember now. You are correct. I was thinking more of the original animated Scooby-Doo, but you are correct, and that was a very brilliant plot twist by them.
Thanks, guys. I haven't seen it.
Oh,
sorry.
Well,
spoilers for a 22-year-old movie.
Yeah, that I'm definitely going to see.
I wanted to talk about the fact that I am a little frustrated that Romana is just out of commission for the climax of the story. Like, it's all just the Doctor doing a Doctor thing. She plays no role in it whatsoever that is remotely helpful to the Doctor.
The Doctor's female companion being tied up to be sacrificed. Are we back into the third Doctor again? That's what it feels like.
And just like Joe Grant in The Demons, Romana looks very pretty in a white dress. So yes, we truly are back in that.
It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons I didn't like her being so frightened the whole time is because it was remarkably one note of frightened. But like, it wasn't even anything that drove plot forward. There was nothing useful about it. At least Adric messing up kind of drives the plot forward. They use it as plot points. But Romana didn't even get any of those. She was just like a conversation piece.
I did really enjoy the hand of the giant vampire coming out of the ground. I thought that was really great. It was clever. It looked good. I'm happy there. But I have a big problem. How did the Doctor calculate exactly the location of the Vampire King's heart?
He's very clever. And that thing is beating like a motherfucker. Everyone hears that thing.
But the way that he describes it was what comes up must come down. So it doesn't sound like there was much aiming. Yeah.
Yeah.
You see, and that is where they could have done something with Adric. The kid's a mathematical genius, so have him calculate the exact trajectory and when it needs to turn and where it needs to land and all that kind of stuff. That would have been a good use of Adric.
Instead, he has his great plan to attack one of the three of them while they're together by going behind that person's back. And even if he's successful, his throat will get ripped out by the other two.
He's so dumb.
They don't give out medals of mathematical excellence for that.
Well, The great vampire is killed, and he's clearly meant to be fucking huge. The three who rule, age and wither away. I thought that was really effective and quite haunting.
Yes, it was. I loved that. Great job of makeup there.
And K9 gets an apology from the rebels.
Yep, I appreciated that.
And the doctor says he's taking Adric back to the Starliner, and we'll see how that works out.
He said, "You young men are going straight home."
Yes. And that is the end of the story. So before we score, we have our camp count.
I give 1 for Alcon's performance.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Can I get half a point for the beard?
Yes.
Yeah. Good one. Good call there.
Diana, anything to add?
No, not particularly.
Okay. 1.5. I'll explain later. No, I didn't catch any. There were once again no quarries in this story. Boo. And no jelly babies. So far this season, we've had no I'll explain laters, no quarries, and no jelly babies. I'll give you guys a spoiler. There is not a single damn quarry this season.
What?
Yeah.
And maybe they didn't have the budget for jelly babies.
Maybe. They were too busy on spending it on special effects. All right. In terms of scoring it, I have the pleasure of going first. And you assholes have destroyed this story for me. I came out of this feeling great. I came out of watching it thinking, you know what? I really enjoyed watching that. And I still did. Yes, it has some problems, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not a fun watch. And I really like the Gothic setting, and yes, it's cliched, and yes, we've done it before, and yes, Riley, it is yet another alien planet that is stuck in medieval Europe, but I don't care. I like it. Yes, Zargo and Camilla were pretty pointless, but I still thought they were fun. Orcon, badass. Time Lord lore, as mentioned, little bit unnecessary, but Kid Me loved that because Kid Me loved all sorts of Time Lord lore. It has its problems, but I still enjoyed it, so I'm going to give this 6.5 wastings out of 10. Julie, you're up next.
I will say that while I was very harsh during discussing this, it wasn't a slog to get through. I ended up watching this all in one sitting, and I never really thought, man, why can't this thing just end? So obviously there must be something to it to not make me do that. There is a lot of plot holes. There's a lot of tightening up that probably should have happened with the script. There are a lot of things that just don't really make a lot of sense. But I did not come out of that thinking that it was a truly awful story. So I'm going to give it a straight 5 leaders with ridiculous makeup out of 10.
All right, Riley.
In line with Julie, we had a lot of fun with this one, but that doesn't mean it isn't an enjoyable watch. It's just we are looking at it from the perspective of what we know the show can do, and this serial fails to hit on certain things. Not necessarily failing to hit the top heights, just it seems to have some glaring issues, but it is fun to watch. It's vampires. I mean, this is why everyone does a vampire story, because there's something about us. We just enjoy the concept no matter where you drop it in. So I'm just going to say this had its moments, but would I be out there looking to try to watch this one again? Probably not. But if you're going to watch it, you could do worse. You could definitely do worse. So I'm going to come in with 6. Make sure to cancel your eSpace subscriptions out of 10.
Diana, last but not least.
Cool. I'm super excited to go after that because I am not the target audience for vampires. I am the person that says we don't need to have them in every show. That, like, we get it. If it's the same, it's the same. And I don't need to see it again. And so, not my favorite. I acknowledge, though, that a lot of people like vampires, and that's totally fine. So I'm not going to score it like super harshly just because I'm not into the vampire vibe. But additionally, it's also a kind of a weak showing in terms of writing. All of the plot holes. There's not a lot of science-y jargon, which could have really fleshed this out and made it more palatable for somebody like me who's not here for like straightforward vampire story. If there had been a little bit more science fiction in it, I think that I would have really gravitated to it because I do like it when you take a traditional story and kind of turn it on its side. So that being said, I'm going to give it 4.5 great vowel shifts out of 10.
Oh, wow. Okay, Diana, you went lower than I was expecting.
Yeah, I don't like vampires.
Well, that gives us an average for the story of 5.5, which is Still an improvement on Meglos, so we'll take the wins we can get, I guess. And that brings us to the end of our episode, and we will be back next time to wrap up this eSpace saga with Warrior's Gate. But in the meantime, as always, thank you so very much for listening, and of course, until next time, have a good one. You have been listening to Watchers in the Fourth Dimension with Diana Burney, Riley Schreck, Julie Philippek, and myself, Anthony Williams. This episode, Give Me an Ankle at Least, was recorded on Tuesday the 26th of November 2024. If this is your first time listening into the show, all of our previous episodes are available wherever you like to get your podcasts. You can interact with us on Facebook and Instagram at Watchers4D, and you can also email us at watchers4d@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, please do subscribe and consider leaving us a review or rating on your favorite podcasting app. All of those things really do help the show. And always remember, just because you have a semi-decent script from 3 years ago, it doesn't mean that it'll necessarily work if you try to retool it for the show's brave new direction.